Close your eyes for a moment, not literally, because you're listening to these words, but close them in your mind. Picture a single drop of water falling onto stone. One drop, insignificant, almost nothing. You could miss it entirely if you blinked. Now picture that same drop falling in the same spot, again and again, every day, for 1,000 days, for 10,000 days, for a lifetime. What do you see? A canyon, a river carved through mountain. The Grand Canyon itself was sculpted not by a single catastrophic event, but by the persistent whisper of water against rock, day after day, millennium after millennium. This is not a metaphor for patience. This is the fundamental architecture of reality itself. Tonight we gather here, you and I, at the intersection of the invisible and the inevitable. We stand at the threshold where psychology meets finance, where the smallest actions echo into the largest outcomes, where a single decision made at breakfast can determine whether you retire in dignity or desperation. We are here to explore something that sounds deceptively simple: atomic habits applied to wealth. But let me be clear from the beginning. This is not another money-making scheme. This is not a blueprint for becoming a millionaire by Tuesday. What we are embarking upon together is far more profound and far more dangerous to the status quo of your current life. We are about to deconstruct and reconstruct your entire relationship with accumulation, with value, with the very concept of wealth itself. Because here is the truth that nobody wants to tell you. Wealth is not an event. It is not a lottery win, a lucky break, an inheritance, or a viral moment. Wealth is a process. It is a silent, invisible, relentless process that begins not in your bank account, but in the neural pathways of your brain, in the micro decisions you make before you're even conscious you're making them. Think about the wealthiest person you know personally, not a celebrity, not someone you read about, someone you actually know. Now think about the moment they became wealthy. Can you pinpoint it? You probably can't. Because it didn't happen in a moment. It happened in 10,000 moments, in tiny decisions repeated so consistently they became automatic, in habits so small they seemed meaningless at the time. This is the revolution we're living through, though most people haven't noticed yet. We live in an age where everyone is searching for the breakthrough, the viral moment, the disruption. But the real power, the sustainable, lasting, generational power, belongs to those who understand the compound effect of the barely noticeable. James Clear wrote in his book, Atomic Habits, that if you improve by just 1% every day, you'll end up 37 times better by the end of the year. Not 37% better, 37 times better. This is not motivational mathematics. This is exponential reality. This is the difference between addition and multiplication, between hoping and having, between dreaming about wealth and systematically constructing it. But here's where it gets psychologically complex, where the philosophy intertwines with the finance. Most people will never experience this compound effect because they fundamentally misunderstand what a habit actually is. They think a habit is something you do, but a habit is actually something you become. It is an identity crystallized into behavior. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Every single dollar you spend or save is a declaration of identity. Every morning you wake up at 5 or sleep until 9 is a statement about who you believe yourself to be. The wealthy don't just have different habits, they are different at the level of identity. And that identity was not gifted to them by genetics or circumstance, though both can help. That identity was constructed, brick by tiny brick, through the compound effect of atomic decisions. So let me ask you directly, right now, with no judgment but with complete honesty required. Who are you becoming with your current habits? Not who do you want to become, not who you think you should become, but who are you actually becoming based on the micro actions you're repeating every single day? If someone followed you around for a month with a camera and observed nothing but your behavioral patterns around money, not what you say about money, but what you do with money, what would they conclude about your financial future? Would they bet on you? This is not comfortable territory. We're not here for comfort. We're here for transformation. And transformation requires us to look directly at what we've been avoiding, to shine light into the corners where our unconscious programming runs the show while our conscious mind makes excuses. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to take a journey together. We're going to travel through time, through psychology, through the hidden architecture of wealth creation. We're going to explore why some people seem to effortlessly accumulate while others work themselves to exhaustion and stay trapped in the same financial position year after year. We're going to deconstruct the mythology of overnight success and reconstruct the reality of incremental inevitability. We're going to examine the neuroscience of habit formation and discover why your brain is simultaneously your greatest asset and your most formidable obstacle in building wealth. We're going to look at the philosophy of value, what wealth actually means in a life well lived. Because here's a truth that will save you decades of misdirected effort. Accumulating money while losing your soul is not wealth. It's poverty and expensive clothing. True wealth, the kind that survives market crashes and personal crises, the kind that creates legacy and meaning, is built through the integration of external accumulation and internal development. It requires you to become someone worthy of wealth, someone capable of holding it, growing it, and using it for something beyond mere survival or status. This journey we're taking tonight has 3 acts, like any great story. In the first act, we'll explore the origins, where your current habits came from, why they exist, and how they've shaped your financial reality up to this moment. We'll travel into your past, not to blame or to excuse, but to understand. Because you cannot transform what you do not understand. In the second act, we'll confront the conflict, the internal battle between who you've been and who you're capable of becoming. We'll examine the psychological resistance, the invisible forces that keep you repeating patterns that no longer serve you. We'll explore the wound that keeps you sabotaging your own success, the fear that masquerades as laziness, the shame that disguises itself as indifference. And in the third act, we'll discover the insight, the transformation, the practical wisdom that can change everything. We'll learn how to design atomic habits specifically for wealth creation, how to make the invisible visible, how to turn theory into practice, how to become the kind of person who builds wealth as naturally as breathing. But I want to warn you, this journey requires something from you. It requires your honesty, your attention, your willingness to be uncomfortable. Because the truth is, most people don't want to be wealthy. They want to feel wealthy. They want the relief that comes from financial security without the discipline required to create it. They want the destination without the journey. If that's you, if you're looking for shortcuts, hacks, or easy answers, this might not be for you. But if you're ready to understand the deep structure of wealth, to rebuild yourself from the identity level up, to commit to the compound effect even when you can't see results yet, then stay with me. Because what we're about to explore together has the power to change not just your bank account, but your entire relationship with time, with value, with effort, with yourself. It has the power to transform you from someone who wants wealth to someone who creates wealth, systematically, inevitably, almost automatically. The water is about to meet the stone. The habit is about to meet the identity. And everything is about to change. Let's begin. Before we can build new habits, we must first excavate the old ones. We must become archaeologists of our own psychology, digging through layers of conditioning, belief, and unconscious programming to understand how we arrived at this present moment with this particular relationship to money. Think back to your earliest memory of wealth, not your first memory of money, though that matters too, but your first memory of understanding that some people had more and some people had less. Maybe you were 7 years old, sitting in the back of your family's car, driving through a neighborhood with houses that seemed like palaces. Or maybe you were 9, noticing that your friend had toys you could only dream of. Or perhaps you were 12, feeling shame about the clothes you wore to school, while others seemed to effortlessly embody some standard you couldn't reach. That moment, that first awakening to financial inequality, planted a seed in your unconscious mind, and from that seed grew a story about what wealth meant, about whether it was accessible to you, about what kind of person deserved it, and what kind of person didn't. Some of you heard the story that wealthy people were greedy, that money corrupted, that there was nobility in poverty and suspicion in abundance. You learned to associate wealth with moral compromise, to believe that wanting more was somehow selfish or shallow. This story became a habit of thinking, which became a habit of feeling, which became a habit of behaving. And now, decades later, you unconsciously sabotage every opportunity for financial growth because deep in your neural architecture lives a belief that wealth would make you one of them. The bad ones, the greedy ones, the ones your childhood self learned to distrust. Others of you heard a different story. You learned that wealth was safety, that money was love, that your value as a human being could be measured in digits on a screen. You watched your parents stress about bills, fight about money, compromise their dreams for financial security, and you made an unconscious vow. You would never be like them. You would be rich. You would be safe. You would prove your worth through accumulation. But here's the cruel irony. That story, while seemingly more conducive to wealth creation, often creates just as much dysfunction. Because when wealth becomes your identity, when your self-worth is entangled with your net worth, you can never accumulate enough. The target keeps moving. The finish line keeps receding. You make more but feel poorer. You achieve more but experience less. You climb the ladder only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. These stories, these origin narratives about money and wealth, are not just interesting psychological trivia. They are the invisible operating system running your financial life. They determine which opportunities you notice and which ones you ignore. They shape what you believe is possible for someone like you. They create the habits you repeat without conscious awareness. James Clear talks about the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. But before we can apply these laws to wealth-building habits, we must first make visible the laws that are already running unconsciously. Let me tell you about Maria. She's not a real person, but she represents a real pattern I've observed countless times. Maria grew up lower middle class. Her parents worked hard, but never seemed to get ahead. They taught her to be careful with money, to never take risks, to save every penny. These were survival habits, born from scarcity, and they served their purpose in her childhood. But Maria is now 35. She has a good job. She makes decent money. Yet she still operates from the scarcity programming of her childhood. She clips coupons to save $3 while ignoring opportunities to invest that could generate $3,000. She researches purchases for weeks to save $50 but never researches investment strategies that could change her life. She lives below her means, yes, but she also lives below her potential. Maria's habits made sense in one context but became limiting in another. This is the tragedy of unexamined habits. They outlive their usefulness but continue to dominate our behavior. Now consider Marcus. He grew up wealthy. Money was never discussed because it was never a problem. He developed habits of spending without thinking, of assuming opportunities would always appear, of believing his comfort was guaranteed. These habits worked fine while his family supported him, but now he's on his own, and those same habits are destroying him. He can't build wealth because he never learned delayed gratification. He can't save because he never experienced the satisfaction of watching small amounts compound into larger ones. 2 different origins, 2 different sets of habits, both ultimately leading to financial limitation because neither person has consciously examined and redesigned their behavioral patterns around money. The neuroscience here is fascinating. Your brain is a prediction machine, constantly trying to minimize surprise and conserve energy. Habits are your brain's way of automating behavior, so it doesn't have to think about every decision. This is evolutionarily brilliant, but it also means your brain doesn't distinguish between habits that serve your current goals and habits that undermine them. Your brain just runs the program it's been given. It follows the neural pathways that have been carved through repetition. And most of those pathways were carved before you were old enough to choose them consciously. Consider this. By the time you were 7 years old, you had already absorbed most of your core beliefs about money from your environment, not through explicit teaching, but through observation, through emotional absorption, through the 1,000 tiny interactions and conversations you witnessed between the adults around you. You learned whether money was discussed openly or hidden in shame. You learned whether abundance was celebrated or viewed with suspicion. You learned whether financial success required integrity or compromise. You learned whether wealth was something people like you could achieve or something reserved for others. And all of this learning happened below the level of conscious awareness. It became part of your identity before you even knew you were forming an identity. This is why affirmations alone don't work. This is why reading another book about budgeting or investing often changes nothing. Because you're trying to override deep psychological programming with surface-level information. You're trying to swim against a current you can't even see. The ancient Greeks had a concept called metanoia, a fundamental transformation of mind, a complete reorientation of consciousness. This is what true wealth building requires. Not new information, but new identity. Not better tips, but transformed psychology. And transformation begins with awareness, with archaeology, with the patient work of excavating your own conditioning and bringing it into the light where you can examine it, question it, and consciously choose whether to keep it or release it. So let's dig deeper. Let's travel further back. Let's understand not just your personal origin story, but the collective origin story we all inherit. For most of human history, hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in conditions of immediate consumption. If you found food, you ate it, because there was no guarantee you'd find more tomorrow. If you had resources, you shared them with your tribe, because your survival depended on their survival. The concept of accumulation beyond immediate need literally didn't exist. Then agriculture happened. Suddenly we could store surplus. We could plan for winter. We could accumulate beyond today's need. And with that shift came entirely new psychological demands. We had to develop the capacity for delayed gratification, for future planning, for abstract thinking about resources we couldn't see or touch. But here's the crucial point. This shift happened only 10,000 years ago, a blink in evolutionary time. Your brain is still mostly wired for immediate consumption, for sharing resources with your tribe, for focusing on today's survival rather than next decade's prosperity. This is why building wealth feels unnatural. This is why saving money activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. This is why spending money on experiences or status triggers dopamine release, while investing in index funds feels boring and unsatisfying. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're just operating with an ancient brain in a modern financial system. And wealthy people, the truly successful ones who build sustainable, multi-generational wealth, aren't operating from some superior genetic code. They've simply developed habits that work with their brain's wiring rather than against it. They've learned to make wealth building automatic rather than effortful. They've created systems that remove willpower from the equation. They've designed their environment so that the financially optimal choice is also the easiest choice. This is the essence of atomic habits, designing your life so that wealth building becomes the path of least resistance. But before we can design that future, we must fully understand this present. We must complete the archaeological dig. We must answer 3 crucial questions. First, what are your current money habits, described with brutal honesty? Not what you think they are or wish they were, but what they actually are. Do you check your bank balance daily or avoid it for weeks? Do you spend first and save what's left, or save first and spend what remains? Do you invest automatically or tell yourself you'll do it next month? Do you research purchases but never research investments? Second, where did these habits come from? What events, beliefs, or models shaped them? This isn't about blame, it's about clarity. Your parents, your first job, your early financial successes or failures, the culture you grew up in, the messages you absorbed from media and society. Third, do these habits serve the future you want to create? Some of your habits are assets, some are liabilities, and some, perhaps most, were once assets but have become liabilities as your life has changed. The habit of frugality that helped you survive college might now be preventing you from investing in opportunities that could transform your life. The habit of generosity that makes you loved by friends might be bankrupting you. The habit of saying yes to every opportunity might be preventing you from focusing on the few opportunities that actually matter. You cannot change what you cannot see. You cannot transform what you will not acknowledge. The origin story matters not because it determines your destiny, but because it explains your starting point. And from that honest assessment of where you are and how you got here, we can begin the work of conscious reconstruction. Because here's the beautiful truth hiding in all this complexity. Habits can be changed. Neural pathways can be rewired. Identity can be transformed. The person you've been is not the person you must remain. But that transformation, that metanoia, requires us to move beyond comfort, beyond excuses, beyond the stories we tell ourselves to avoid the work. It requires us to enter the conflict. Now we arrive at the heart of darkness, the place where transformation lives and dies, the battlefield where your future self fights your current self for dominance. This is the conflict, not external, but internal. Not about market conditions or opportunities, but about resistance, fear, and the exquisite pain of growth. Let me tell you something that might disturb you. You are actively sabotaging your own wealth creation right now, in this very moment, in ways you're completely unaware of. You think you want to be wealthy. You tell yourself you're trying. You read the books, listen to the podcasts, maybe even create a budget or investment plan. But underneath all that conscious intention runs a powerful countercurrent of unconscious resistance. And that resistance isn't weakness. It's not lack of discipline or motivation. It's something far more sophisticated and far more difficult to overcome. It's identity protection. Your brain is designed to maintain consistency with your self-concept. This is a survival mechanism. Dramatic, sudden changes to identity threaten the coherence of self, which threatens survival itself. So your brain creates resistance to any behavior that contradicts your current identity, even if that behavior would benefit your future. If you identify as someone who's not good with money, your brain will subtly sabotage any attempt to become good with money. If you identify as middle class, your brain will resist behaviors associated with wealth creation because those behaviors feel inauthentic, performative, not who you really are. This is the core conflict. You cannot outperform your identity. Your outcomes will always equilibrate to match your self-concept. This is why lottery winners often return to their previous financial state within a few years. This is why people who lose weight often gain it back. The external changed, but the internal remained the same, and eventually, the internal reasserted control. So the question isn't, what habits do I need to build wealth? The question is, who do I need to become to be someone who naturally builds wealth? And that question leads us into dangerous territory, because becoming someone new requires killing off parts of who you've been. It requires grief. It requires letting go of stories you've told about yourself for decades. It requires admitting that maybe you weren't doing your best all along. Maybe you were protecting yourself from the risk of really trying and failing. I want to introduce you to a concept from psychology called cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort you experience when you hold contradictory beliefs or when your actions contradict your beliefs. Your brain finds this state intolerable and will do almost anything to resolve it. Here's how this plays out with wealth. You believe you want to be wealthy, but you also believe that wealthy people are somehow less authentic, or that money changes people negatively, or that you don't deserve wealth, or that wanting wealth is shallow. These beliefs coexist uncomfortably. So what does your brain do? It resolves the dissonance by sabotaging your wealth-building behaviors. You forget to contribute to your investment account. You find reasons to spend money on things that feel important in the moment. You tell yourself you'll start next month. You make poor financial decisions that mysteriously always seem to keep you exactly where you already are. And then you tell yourself a story. I guess I'm just not meant to be rich. I guess money isn't that important to me. I guess I'm more focused on experiences than accumulation. These stories feel true. They might even be partially true. But they're also convenient. They protect you from having to confront the real dissonance, the gap between the life you're living and the life you're capable of creating. Now layer onto this another psychological phenomenon, loss aversion. Research by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed that people feel the pain of losing something twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. Your brain is wired to avoid loss more powerfully than it's motivated to pursue gain. This is why it's so hard to start investing. Every dollar you invest is a dollar you can't spend. Your brain experiences this as a loss, even though intellectually you know it's a gain. The abstract future benefit can't compete with the concrete present loss. This is why people stay in jobs they hate, in relationships that don't serve them, in financial situations that limit them. The known discomfort feels safer than the unknown possibility because at least you know how to survive what you're currently experiencing. Change requires walking into uncertainty, and uncertainty, to your ancient brain, equals danger. So we have identity protection, maintaining your current self-concept, cognitive dissonance, sabotaging contradictory behaviors, and loss aversion making change feel more painful than staying stuck. This is the trinity of resistance. This is why information alone never changes behavior. This is why you can know exactly what you should do and still not do it. But it gets even more complex, because layered underneath all of this is something even more primal. The wound. Everyone has a financial wound, some experience or set of experiences that created a deep emotional charge around money. Maybe you watched your parents lose everything. Maybe you experienced the humiliation of poverty as a child. Maybe you were told, explicitly or implicitly, that people like you don't get to have wealth. Or maybe your wound goes the other direction. Maybe you grew up with so much focus on money that you never learned what actually mattered. Maybe you watched wealth destroy relationships, create paranoia, isolate people from authentic connection. These wounds create defensive patterns. Shame becomes either paralysis or overcompensation. Fear becomes either hoarding or reckless spending. Unworthiness becomes either self-sabotage or exhausting overachievement. And here's what makes this so insidious. The wound operates completely unconsciously. You don't wake up thinking, I'm going to sabotage my wealth today because of unresolved childhood trauma. You just mysteriously find yourself repeating the same patterns, making the same mistakes, ending up in the same place year after year. The psychologist Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your financial fate is not predetermined, but it will feel predetermined until you bring awareness to these unconscious patterns." So how do we do that? How do we bring light into this darkness? We start by naming the resistance. When you feel the urge to avoid checking your bank balance, pause. Notice the feeling. Name it. This is fear. This is shame. This is the protective mechanism that learned money discussions were dangerous. When you find yourself about to make an impulsive purchase, pause. Notice the craving. What are you really buying? Comfort? Status? A temporary relief from anxiety? What emotion are you trying to solve with spending? When you tell yourself you'll start investing next month, pause. Notice the delay. What are you avoiding? The vulnerability of not being an expert, the fear of making a mistake, the discomfort of having less money available for immediate gratification. This practice of pausing and noticing sounds simple, but it's revolutionary, because the unconscious patterns only have power when they're unconscious. The moment you shine awareness on them, they lose some of their grip. But awareness alone isn't enough. You also need to understand the positive function these patterns have been serving. Every seemingly self-destructive behavior is actually protecting you from something. Financial avoidance protects you from the anxiety of confronting your situation. Spending protects you from uncomfortable feelings. Staying broke protects you from the fear of managing wealth or the guilt of having more than others. Your resistance isn't the enemy. It's a protector that's outlived its usefulness, and you can't fight your protector. You can only thank it for its service and gently show it that you're safe now, that you have new tools, that you're ready to take responsibility for your own protection. This requires compassion. Most people try to shame themselves into new habits. They beat themselves up for their financial mistakes, their lack of discipline, their repeated failures. But shame is the least effective motivator for lasting change. Shame creates more resistance, more avoidance, more of the very behaviors you're trying to change. What works instead is what psychologists call self-compassion. Treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a good friend. Recognizing that you're doing the best you can with the awareness and tools you currently have. Acknowledging that everyone struggles with these patterns because everyone has the same basic brain architecture. From that foundation of self-compassion, you can begin to experiment with new habits. Small ones, atomic ones. Habits so tiny they seem ridiculous. This is where James Clear's framework becomes powerful. He talks about the 2-minute rule. When starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. Not because 2 minutes will change your life, but because it builds the identity. You're not trying to save $1 million. You're trying to become the kind of person who saves. So you start by automatically transferring $1 per day into savings. Is $1 going to make you rich? Of course not. But $1 proves something to yourself. It proves you're someone who saves. It builds the identity, and identity, compounded over time, creates destiny. You're not trying to become a sophisticated investor overnight. You're trying to become the kind of person who invests. So you start by spending 2 minutes per day reading about investing. Just 2 minutes. That's barely enough to understand anything, but it's enough to tell yourself, I am someone who learns about investing. And from that identity shift, larger behaviors naturally emerge. This is the war you're fighting, not against market conditions or your boss or the economy, but against your own resistance, your own fear, your own outdated programming. And in this war, force doesn't work. Willpower doesn't work. Shame doesn't work. What works is patience, consistency, self-compassion, and the understanding that you're rewiring neural pathways that have been carved over decades. The brain researchers tell us it takes somewhere between 18 and 254 days for a new habit to become automatic, with the average being about 66 days. But that's not the whole story, because you're not just building a habit, you're building an identity. And identity transformation is measured not in days, but in seasons, in years, in the accumulation of thousands of small proofs that you are becoming someone new. Here's what this looks like in practice. You decide you want to become someone who invests, not someone who should invest or someone who will invest someday, but someone who is an investor. That's identity. So you start ridiculously small. You open an investment account. That's day one. You've now done something that an investor does. You've created evidence for your new identity. Day two. You transfer $10 into that account. Not a meaningful amount of money, but a meaningful action. You're building the habit loop. Cue, routine, reward. The cue might be having your morning coffee. The routine is opening your investment app. The reward is the satisfaction of seeing your account balance increase, even slightly, plus the psychological reward of proving your new identity. Day 3 through day 66. You repeat this same atomic habit. Some days you feel motivated. Most days you don't. But motivation doesn't matter, because you've designed the habit to be so easy that you can do it even on your worst days. You've removed friction. You've made it automatic. And something magical happens around day 40. You stop thinking about whether to do it. You just do it. The neural pathway has been carved. the behavior has become automatic. You've reached what psychologists call automaticity. But more importantly, you've started to identify as an investor. When someone asks about your hobbies, you mention that you're learning about investing. When financial opportunities arise, you notice them because you're primed to notice them. When financial decisions need to be made, you think like an investor thinks because you are an investor. This is the compound effect at the identity level. And this is what wealthy people understand intuitively. Even if they can't articulate it, wealth is not created through dramatic actions, but through mundane repetitions that build identity, which shapes perception, which determines behavior, which creates results. But, and this is crucial, you will be tested. The universe seems to conspire to test new identities. Just when you've committed to saving, an unexpected expense will appear. Just when you've started investing, the market will drop. Just when you've decided to become wealthy, opportunities to spend will multiply. These aren't signs you're on the wrong path. They're initiations. They're the universe asking, "Are you serious? Is this real? Or is this just another story you're telling yourself?" Your response to these tests determines everything. If you abandon the habit at the first challenge, you prove to yourself that the identity shift wasn't real. You reinforce the old neural pathways. You return to the default. But if you maintain the habit through difficulty, even if you scale it back, even if you miss a day and restart the next, you build anti-fragility. You prove that you're someone who persists. You carve deeper neural pathways. You become more of who you're trying to become. And here's the beautiful paradox. The difficulty is not an obstacle to the transformation. The difficulty is the transformation. The challenge is not something to avoid. The challenge is what creates the capacity you're trying to develop. Ancient philosophers understood this. The Stoics talked about obstacles being the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Post-traumatic growth research shows that difficulty, when properly processed, doesn't just harm us. It can make us stronger, wiser, more capable than we were before. So the conflict we're exploring isn't something to resolve quickly. It's something to engage with deeply, patiently, compassionately. It's the furnace where your new self is forged, but we cannot stay in the conflict forever. We cannot dwell in the darkness indefinitely. We must move toward insight, toward light, toward transformation. And that's where we go next. There is a moment in every transformation when something shifts, not gradually, but suddenly. A moment when all the accumulated pressure of change reaches a critical threshold and the system reorganizes at a higher level of complexity. Water doesn't gradually become ice. It remains water at 33 degrees, at 32.5 degrees, at 32.1 degrees. And then, at exactly 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the molecular structure transforms. Liquid becomes solid, the same substance, fundamentally reorganized. This is the insight we've been moving toward. This is the moment when understanding becomes knowing, when theory becomes practice, when the person who wants wealth becomes the person who creates wealth. But first, let me destroy a myth that might be limiting you. You've been taught that building wealth requires sacrifice, that you must give up the life you love to get the security you want, that wealth creation and life enjoyment exist in opposition, that every dollar saved is a dollar of happiness denied. This is false. This is the paradigm of addition, the belief that life is a zero-sum game where more of one thing means less of another. But wealth, real wealth, operates on the paradigm of multiplication. It's not about choosing between life now and life later. It's about designing a life where wealth creation and life fulfillment are the same activity. Let me show you what I mean through a framework I call the 4 dimensions of atomic wealth habits. First dimension, the habit of attention. Before you can build wealth, you must learn to notice it. Not just money in your account, but value everywhere. Wealthy people have developed the habit of attention. They notice opportunities that others miss because their brain is trained to see value. This is not about being opportunistic or manipulative. It's about training your perception to recognize where value can be created, exchanged, or multiplied. Right now, you walk past opportunities every single day because your attention isn't trained to see them. You meet people who could change your life, but you're too focused on your phone. You encounter problems that could become profitable solutions, but you're too busy complaining. You experience inefficiencies that could be optimized, gaps that could be filled, needs that could be met. The atomic habit here is simple. Spend 5 minutes each day actively noticing value. Where is value being created? Where is value being destroyed? Where could value be better distributed? What problems do you observe? What inefficiencies frustrate you? What do people need that they don't have? This habit costs nothing. It requires no special skill, but it trains your brain to perceive the world the way wealthy people perceive it, as a landscape of possibility rather than a valley of scarcity. Second dimension, the habit of leverage. The middle class trades time for money. The wealthy trade systems for money. The fundamental difference is leverage. Leverage means arranging resources so that a small input creates a large output. It means working smarter, not just harder. It means building assets that continue generating value even when you're not actively working. But here's what most people misunderstand. Leverage isn't something you need resources to create. Leverage is itself a habit, a way of thinking that you can practice with whatever resources you currently have. The atomic habit. Every time you complete a task, ask yourself, how could this be systematized? How could this create value more than once? How could this scale? If you write an email, could it become a template? If you solve a problem, could the solution help others? If you learn something valuable, could you teach it? If you create something, could it be replicated, automated, or distributed? This habit transforms you from a consumer of time to a creator of leverage, and leverage, compounded over years, is what creates wealth. Third dimension, the habit of value creation. Most people focus on making money. Wealthy people focus on creating value, and they let money be a byproduct of that value creation. This isn't semantic. This is fundamental. When you focus on making money, you optimize for extraction. When you focus on creating value, you optimize for contribution. And paradoxically, contribution creates more sustainable wealth than extraction. The atomic habit. Every day, do one small thing that creates value for someone else with no immediate expectation of return. Help someone solve a problem, share knowledge, make an introduction, improve something, create something. This habit does 3 things. First, it builds your capacity to recognize and create value. Second, it expands your network of meaningful relationships. Third, it shifts your identity from someone who takes from the world to someone who gives to the world. And that identity shift changes everything about how opportunities flow to you. Fourth dimension, the habit of compound thinking. This is the meta habit, the habit that amplifies all other habits. It's the practice of thinking in terms of compound effects, of asking not, what will this do today, but where will this lead if I repeat it for 1,000 days? Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest wealth builder of our time, attributes most of his success not to intelligence, but to patience. He understands compound thinking better than almost anyone alive. He tells the story of asking a room full of students who wants to be the best investor in their class. Every hand goes up. Then he asks who wants to be the best investor in their class 20 years from now. Most hands stay up. Then he asks who's willing to do what it takes to be the best investor in their class, even if it means not being the best right now. Most hands go down. That's the difference. Compound thinking requires you to optimize for the long game, even when the long game feels impossibly distant. The atomic habit. Before making any significant decision, ask yourself, if I repeat this decision 1,000 times, where will I end up? This single question can save you from a decade of mistakes. Should you buy that expensive car? Ask, if I made purchases like this 1,000 times, where would I be? Should you take that high-paying job you hate? Ask, if I optimized for short-term money over long-term fulfillment 1,000 times, what life would I be living? Should you invest that money or spend it? Ask, if I delayed gratification like this 1,000 times, what would my financial situation look like? Compound thinking is the antidote to the tyranny of now. It's how you make present decisions that your future self will thank you for. Now, let's take these 4 dimensions and integrate them into a practical system. A system so simple you can start today, so powerful it can transform your financial life within 5 years. I call it the 1% wealth system. Here's how it works. Step 1. The atomic savings habit. Starting today, automatically save 1% of everything you earn, not 10%, not even 5%, just 1%. This amount is so small it won't change your lifestyle, but it will change your identity. You're proving to yourself, I am someone who saves. I am someone who prioritizes future me. I am someone building wealth. After 30 days, increase it to 2%. After another 30 days, increase to 3%. Keep scaling until you reach a savings rate that feels sustainable but challenging. For most people, this ends up being somewhere between 15–30% of income. But you started with 1%. You built the identity before you built the amount. And because of that, the higher percentages feel natural, not sacrificial. Step 2. The atomic investment habit. On the same day you start saving, start investing. Not everything you save, just 1% of your income, automatically, into a low-cost index fund. You don't need to understand advanced investing strategies. You don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to time the market. You just need to start building the identity of an investor. Over time, as your knowledge grows, you can sophisticate your strategy. But right now, you just need to start. Because the difference between investing 1% starting today and waiting until you know enough is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, thanks to compound interest. Step 3. The atomic learning habit. Spend 15 minutes every day learning about wealth, not just money, but value creation, leverage, psychology, philosophy, systems thinking. Read books, listen to podcasts, study successful people, analyze failures. This habit does something profound. It trains your brain to think about wealth even when you're not actively building it. It creates what psychologists call unconscious incubation, the process by which your mind works on problems in the background. You'll start noticing things you never noticed before. You'll make connections you never made before. You'll have insights that seem to come from nowhere, but actually come from the cumulative effect of consistent learning. Step 4. The atomic review habit. Once per week, spend 30 minutes reviewing your financial situation. Not obsessively, not anxiously, but objectively. Where did money come from? Where did it go? What patterns do you notice? What's working? What's not? This habit creates feedback loops. Without feedback, you're operating blind. With feedback, you can iterate, improve, and optimize. Step 5. The atomic identity habit. This is the most powerful habit and the one most people skip. Every day, do one small thing that proves you are becoming wealthy. Not that you want to be wealthy. Not that you should be wealthy. That you are wealthy right now in embryonic form. Maybe you read a financial statement and understand it. Maybe you have a conversation about investing. Maybe you make a decision that prioritizes long-term value over short-term comfort. Maybe you teach something you've learned to someone else. These tiny identity proofs accumulate. They create a self-concept shift. And remember, you cannot outperform your identity. Change your identity, and your behaviors change automatically. Now here's what happens when you implement this system consistently for 5 years. Year 1 feels like nothing is happening. You're saving small amounts. You're investing small amounts. The numbers on your screen barely change. You're tempted to quit because the results don't match the effort. But underneath the visible surface, something profound is happening. You're building neural pathways. You're proving an identity. You're developing the psychological muscles required for wealth building. This year is about identity, not about outcomes. Year 2 is when you start to see small results. Your savings account has an actual cushion. Your investment account shows growth. You've made it through some challenges without abandoning your habits. You're starting to believe this might actually work. Year 3 is when things get interesting. The compound effect starts to become visible. You've accumulated knowledge that changes how you see opportunities. You've developed discipline that makes decisions easier. You've built systems that run without constant willpower. Your habits have become automatic. Year 4 is acceleration. Everything you've built is now working together synergistically. Your savings rate is higher. Your investments have grown. Your knowledge allows you to see and seize opportunities you would have missed before. You're becoming the person you needed to become. Year 5 is transformation. You look back at who you were and barely recognize yourself. The gap between your current financial situation and your starting point seems impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was inevitable. Because you understood the compound effect and you trusted the process even when you couldn't see the results. But let me be clear about something. This system is simple, but it's not easy. The difficulty isn't in understanding the system. The difficulty is in executing it consistently when life happens, when emergencies arise, when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when everyone around you is spending freely and you're building slowly. This is where philosophy becomes as important as psychology. You need a reason to persist. You need a why that's strong enough to sustain you through the inevitable challenges. For some people, the why is freedom, the ability to make choices based on values rather than necessity. For others, it's legacy, creating generational wealth that gives their children opportunities they never had. For others, it's impact, accumulating resources to solve problems they care about. What's your why? Not the surface answer, but the deep truth. Why do you actually want to build wealth? And is that why strong enough to sustain atomic habits for 5 years when results are invisible? Because here's the final insight, the one that ties everything together. Wealth building is not separate from personal development. It's not something you do in addition to becoming who you're meant to be. It is becoming who you're meant to be. Every time you delay gratification, you're building capacity for long-term thinking. Every time you maintain a habit despite not feeling motivated, you're building integrity. Every time you learn something new about value creation, you're expanding your consciousness. Every time you contribute value to others, you're developing purpose. The money is just the scorecard. The real wealth is who you become in the process of building the money. And that version of you, disciplined, patient, valuable, generous, wise, is someone worth becoming regardless of whether the bank account grows. Though ironically, once you become that person, the bank account grows almost automatically. This is the alchemy. You cannot become wealthy while remaining who you currently are. You must transform. And that transformation, initiated through atomic habits and sustained through compound consistency, is the real work. The money is just proof that the transformation is working. We've traveled far together tonight, from the archaeology of your financial past through the conflict of transformation to the insight of atomic wealth habits. We've explored psychology and philosophy, neuroscience and wisdom, theory and practice. But now comes the most important part, what you do next. Because understanding changes nothing. Only action changes things, and not dramatic action. Not New Year's resolution action, but atomic action. Small, consistent, identity-building action. You are standing right now at a threshold. Behind you is the person you've been, the habits, the stories, the limitations, the safety of the known. Ahead of you is the person you're capable of becoming, and with that becoming, a completely different financial reality. But you cannot arrive at that future by wishing, by hoping, by waiting for the perfect moment or the right opportunity. You can only arrive there by beginning, by taking the first atomic step. Today, right now. Let me leave you with a final story. There's an ancient Chinese bamboo tree that, when planted, shows no growth for the first 4 years. You water it, you fertilize it, you care for it, and nothing happens. No sprout, no growth, nothing visible. Most people would give up. They'd assume the seed was dead, their effort wasted. But in the 5th year, the bamboo tree grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. The question is, did the tree grow 90 feet in 6 weeks? Or did it grow 90 feet in 5 years? Of course, it grew in 5 years. Those first 4 years, when nothing was visible above ground, everything was happening below ground. Roots were spreading, deep and strong, creating the foundation that would eventually support 90 feet of growth. Your wealth building works exactly the same way. The first year, the second year, even the 3rd year might feel like nothing is happening. The numbers might seem insignificant. Your friends might be living more exciting lives, buying nicer things, going on better vacations. But underneath the visible surface, if you're maintaining your atomic habits, everything is happening. Neural pathways are being carved, identity is being built, knowledge is accumulating, systems are being refined, the foundation is being established. And then, seemingly suddenly, the growth becomes visible. The compound effect reaches the threshold where it becomes undeniable. 5 years of patient work delivers 20 years of visible results. But only if you start, only if you persist, only if you trust the process even when you can't see the progress. So here's your atomic action for today. Choose one habit from this journey, just one. The smallest possible version of that habit. Something so easy you can't say no. Maybe it's transferring $1 into a savings account. Maybe it's spending 2 minutes reading about investing. Maybe it's writing down one observation about value creation. Maybe it's simply deciding, consciously and deliberately, that you are someone who builds wealth. Do that one thing today, then do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. Don't worry about whether it's enough. Don't worry about whether it's the perfect habit. Just prove to yourself that you can maintain a single atomic habit for 30 days, because that proof, that demonstration of consistency, will change your identity. And once your identity changes, everything else follows. Remember, you are not trying to become wealthy overnight. You are trying to become the kind of person who builds wealth systematically over time. There's a massive difference between those two goals. The first is about outcome. The second is about identity. And identity, sustained through atomic habits and amplified through compound effect, creates outcomes that seem miraculous but are actually inevitable. Wealth is not a destination you arrive at, it's a direction you travel in. Every small decision, every tiny habit, every moment of choosing your future self over your current comfort is a step in that direction. And if you take enough steps, consistently, patiently, persistently, something magical happens. The journey becomes the destination. The process becomes the purpose. Who you're becoming becomes more valuable than what you're accumulating. You stop building wealth to escape your life and start building wealth as an expression of your life. You stop seeing money as the solution and start seeing value creation as the calling. You stop feeling like you're sacrificing and start feeling like you're becoming. This is the ultimate insight. True wealth is not about having money. It's about being free. Free from fear, from scarcity thinking, from the tyranny of circumstances. Free to choose, to create, to contribute, to become. And that freedom is built one atomic habit at a time, one identity proof at a time, one day at a time. The compound effect is already working in your life. The question is, what is it compounding? Debt or wealth? Limitation or expansion? Fear or freedom? You get to decide, not with one big decision, but with 1,000 small ones. Starting today, starting now. The water is meeting the stone. The habit is meeting the identity. The becoming has already begun. All that's left is to continue, to trust, to persist, and to remember On the difficult days when progress feels invisible, that beneath the surface everything is growing, the roots are spreading, the foundation is being built, and in time, in the natural unfolding of the compound effect, 90 feet of growth will emerge from years of patient cultivation. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not limited by your past or your current circumstances. You are exactly where you need to be to begin. So begin. Build one atomic habit today. Prove one piece of your new identity. Take one step toward the person you're becoming. The wealth will follow. Not because wealth is the goal, but because wealth is the natural result of becoming someone who creates value, who thinks in compounds, who builds systems, who persists through challenges, who maintains integrity with their future self. That person is already within you. These habits will simply reveal them. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The wealth of a lifetime begins with a single dollar saved, a single minute learned, a single decision made in alignment with who you're becoming rather than who you've been. Take that step, make that decision, begin. The rest will compound. Welcome to the foundations of wealth. Welcome to the person you're becoming. Welcome to the life that's waiting for you on the other side of consistent, atomic, transformative action. Your future self is watching. Make them proud.